In the last 15 years, the American economy has weathered 3 recessions, a global pandemic, and the highest inflation rates in 4 decades. The price of gas has doubled, the cost of housing has skyrocketed, the price of a dozen eggs has fluctuated wildly, sometimes tripling overnight. But in the back corner of a warehouse in Issaquah, Washington, there is a number that refuses to move: $4.99. To the average shopper, it's just a cheap dinner, but to the financial world, it is a mathematical impossibility. This isn't a story about food. It is a story about a multi-billion-dollar corporation declaring war on the fundamental laws of economics. It is the story of how a single item, a loss leader bleeding millions of dollars a year, became the most important strategic asset in American retail. And to keep that price tag frozen in time, Costco would have to do something that no retailer had dared to attempt in 100 years.
Walk into any of the 800 Costco warehouses around the globe, and your senses are immediately assaulted. The smell of tires, the towering pallets of bulk paper towels, the sheer industrial scale of consumption. But if you navigate the concrete labyrinth, past the electronics and through the seasonal aisles, you will eventually find yourself at the back of the store. You will see the glowing red heat lamps. You will smell the savory roasted air. And you will see the line. The rotisserie chicken. Since 2009, the price has remained exactly $4.99. In that same time frame, the consumer price index has risen by nearly 45%. If this chicken had simply followed the rate of inflation, it should cost nearly $8 today. Yet it doesn't. Why? In business school, this is taught as a loss leader. The theory is simple. A store sells a high-demand item at a loss to get you through the door, banking on the fact that you will buy a high-margin item, like a television or a diamond ring, on your way out. And for years, analysts believed this was the entire strategy. Costco was happily losing $30 to $40 million a year on poultry just to get you to renew your $60 membership. But that is a surface-level analysis. It misses the true genius of the strategy. The chicken isn't just a discount, it is a gravity anchor. In an era of shrinking package sizes and shrinkflation, where consumers feel constantly cheated by corporations, the $4.99 chicken serves a psychological function. It signals to the consumer that this building is a safe haven from inflation. It creates a halo effect of trust that extends to every other item on the shelf. If Costco is willing to lose money to feed your family dinner, surely they are giving you a fair deal on the Michelin tires and the organic beef. But by 2015, this anchor was becoming a heavy chain around the company's neck. The sheer volume was becoming unmanageable. Costco wasn't just selling a few thousand birds, they were selling 80, 90, eventually 100 million chickens a year. The poultry industry, however, was changing. Consolidation was rampant. A handful of massive conglomerates were tightening their grip on the supply chain, squeezing retailers for every penny. Costco's executives looked at the spreadsheets and realized a terrifying truth. The problem wasn't the customer. The problem wasn't the price. The problem was that they were at the mercy of a supplier monopoly that had the power to break their most sacred promise. If the giants of the meat industry decided to raise prices, Costco would have 2 choices: lose hundreds of millions of dollars or raise the price of the chicken. Neither was an option. And so, in a boardroom in Washington, a radical idea began to take shape. If they couldn't control the suppliers, what if they became the supplier?
To understand why a grocery store would eventually spend nearly $500 million to build a factory in the middle of Nebraska, we first have to understand the enemy they were fighting. It wasn't a competitor like Walmart or Amazon. It was their own partners. For decades, the American poultry industry has been quietly undergoing a radical transformation. In the mid-20th century, chicken farming was a decentralized network of independent growers. But capitalism, inevitably, drifts toward efficiency, and efficiency drifts toward consolidation. By the early 2000s, the vast, sprawling map of American chicken farmers had been redrawn into the hands of a few titans. Tyson Foods, Pilgrim's Pride, Sanderson Farms, Purdue. Today, these few conglomerates, often referred to as Big Chicken, control over 60% of the poultry sold in the United States. They don't just process the meat, they control the genetics of the birds, the feed mills that nourish them, and the trucking lines that distribute them. They possess what economists call pricing power. When you control the majority of the supply, you dictate the terms of the market. For a retailer like Costco, this consolidation presented a strategic nightmare. Costco's entire business model is predicated on a specific, rigid formula. They cap their profit margins on goods at roughly 14%. This discipline is what builds their fanatical customer loyalty. But that model relies on purchasing power, the ability to bully suppliers into lowering their prices so Costco can pass the savings to you. But you can't bully a monopoly. Throughout the 2010s, as grain prices fluctuated and global demand for protein soared, the big chicken producers began to turn the screws. They raised wholesale prices, knowing that retailers had nowhere else to go. If Tyson raised the price of a bird by 50 cents, a standard grocery store would simply raise the price on the shelf by 60 cents to protect their margin. But Costco couldn't do that. The $4.99 price point was sacrosanct. It was written in stone by the company's founders. So every time the suppliers raised their rates, Costco had to eat the difference. The loss leader strategy was mutating into a hemorrhaging wound. The tension reached a breaking point around 2015. A massive outbreak of avian flu decimated flocks across the Midwest, sending wholesale poultry prices skyward. Suddenly, the supply of birds wasn't just expensive, it was scarce. Costco was facing shortages. For a company that prides itself on supply chain mastery, empty shelves are a cardinal sin. But worse than the empty shelves was the realization of their own vulnerability. Executives at Costco's headquarters in Issaquah looked at the projections and saw a grim future. As long as they relied on the oligopoly, they were merely renters in their own business. The suppliers held all the leverage. They could dictate the price, the quality, and the size of the birds, which, by the way, were getting smaller as suppliers tried to cut corners, while Costco demanded a minimum weight of 3 pounds. The relationship had become parasitic. The suppliers knew Costco needed the birds to drive foot traffic, and they were extracting a chicken tax that amounted to tens of millions of dollars in lost profits annually. But how long could a retailer, even one as cash-rich as Costco, continue to subsidize the American dinner table before the shareholders demanded an end to the charity? It was an existential choice. They could surrender, raise the price to $5.99 or $6.99 and admit that inflation had finally won. Or they could do something that defied every rule of modern retail specialization. They could stop being a customer. The decision was made quietly, but its implications were thunderous. Costco would not just negotiate better terms, they would not just find a new supplier, they were going to sever the strings of the oligopoly entirely. They were going to leave the safety of the retail sector and enter the muddy, bloody, high-risk world of industrial farming. They were going to build their own chicken empire from the ground up. And they were going to do it right in the backyard of the giants they were trying to escape. In the corporate world, radical changes are rarely announced with fanfare. They're buried in footnotes, obscured by jargon, or hidden behind code names. For Costco, the plan to break the poultry monopoly was designated Project Lincoln. The name itself felt presidential, historic. But the operation had more in common with a covert military strike than a retail expansion. The objective was clear. Costco needed to secure a supply of 100 million chickens annually, roughly 40% of their total demand, independent of the big chicken cartel. To do this, they couldn't just buy a farm, they had to build a kingdom. The first step was geography. If you want to control the cost of a chicken, you don't look at the bird, you look at what the bird eats. Feed accounts for nearly 60 to 70% of the cost of raising poultry. Every mile you have to truck corn and soy to a feed mill adds pennies to the price. And in the game of rotisserie economics, pennies are everything. So the scouts for Project Lincoln turned their eyes to the heart of the American Corn Belt. They bypassed the traditional poultry hubs of the South and zeroed in on Fremont, Nebraska. Fremont sits atop some of the most fertile soil in the world. It is awash in cheap, high-quality corn and soybeans. By planting their flag here, Costco ensured that their raw materials would travel minutes, not hours, to reach the feed mill. It was a logistical masterstroke, cutting the supply chain down to the bone before the first egg was even hatched. But the ambition of Project Lincoln went far beyond location. The scale of the proposed facility was staggering. Costco wasn't just building a slaughterhouse, they were constructing a fully vertically integrated ecosystem on a single 400-acre site. Imagine a complex the size of a small city. On one side, a massive feed mill capable of processing tens of thousands of bushels of grain a day. On the other, a hatchery designed to incubate millions of eggs under clinically precise conditions. And at the center, an art-of-the-century processing plant that could slaughter, clean, and package 2 million chickens a week. The price tag for this fortress? $450 million. To put that number in perspective, this was not an investment in a high-margin tech product or a luxury clothing line. This was nearly $500 million in upfront capital poured into the ground to protect a product that they sell for a loss. It was a bet-the-farm moment for the company's fresh food division. Wall Street analysts scratched their heads. Retailers simply do not do this. Kroger doesn't grow its own carrots. Walmart doesn't raise its own cattle. The liability is too high. The margins are too thin. By crossing the line from buyer to farmer, Costco was taking on the weather, the biology, and the sheer unpredictability of agriculture. But the architects of Project Lincoln saw what the analysts missed. This $450 million wasn't an expense, it was an insurance policy against the future. Construction crews broke ground, and soon the skyline of Fremont was dominated by the steel skeletons of the new facility. It was a marvel of modern engineering, designed with a level of automation and efficiency that made traditional farms look antiquated. They weren't just building a factory, they were building a machine designed to do one thing: produce a 3-pound bird for exactly $4.99 forever. But pouring concrete is the easy part. How exactly does a retailer take control of a biological cycle that has been refined by farmers for 10,000 years and squeeze even more efficiency out of it? As the facility neared completion, the real work began. Costco had the hardware, now they needed the software, the living, breathing network of farmers who would actually raise the birds. And to get them, Costco would have to disrupt the local economy just as violently as they had disrupted the national market. Project Lincoln was no longer a plan on paper, it was alive, and it was hungry.
To the uninitiated, vertical integration is a dry term from an economics textbook. It brings to mind images of Henry Ford owning rubber plantations in Brazil, or Andrew Carnegie buying iron ore mines. It is an industrial strategy from a bygone era, largely abandoned in favor of outsourcing and specialization. But in Fremont, Nebraska, Costco resurrected this industrial titan. They didn't just build a factory, they built a closed loop, a biological circuit where nothing enters and nothing leaves without a barcode and a cost analysis. To understand how Costco saves 35 cents on a chicken, you have to follow the bird through a system designed to eliminate the one thing capitalism usually loves: choice. The process begins at the hatchery. Here, millions of eggs are incubated in a highly controlled environment that feels more like a laboratory than a farm. There are no independent suppliers here.
Costco owns the genetics. They determine the breed, the growth rate, and the projected weight of every single chick before it even cracks its shell. Once hatched, the birds are transported to the growers, and this is where the model shifts from traditional farming to something far more regimented. Costco recruited a network of local farmers, convincing them to build massive barns to Costco's exact specifications. But these farmers don't own the chickens. They don't buy the feed. They are, in essence, landlords for Costco's inventory. The brilliance of this system lies in the feed. Remember, feed is the single highest cost in poultry farming. In the traditional model, a farmer buys feed from a mill, which buys corn from a grain elevator, which buys from a grower. Every hand that touches that corn takes a profit margin. Costco eliminated the hands. The massive feed mill in Fremont takes corn directly from the local fields, grinds it, mixes it with soy and nutrients according to a proprietary recipe, and trucks it directly to the barns. No middlemen, no markup. The feed flows like fuel through a pipeline that Costco owns from end to end. This sovereignty over the supply chain allows for a level of granular optimization that is terrifying to competitors. Because Costco controls the feed, they control the size of the bird. They don't want a 5-pound chicken one week and a 3-pound chicken the next. They want a uniform, predictable product that fits perfectly into the rotisserie ovens and the plastic containers. Uniformity is speed. Speed is money. By owning the slaughterhouse, they also dictate the schedule. There is no waiting for a processing slot at a Tyson plant. When the birds reach the target weight, they are harvested immediately. The efficiency creates a conveyor belt of protein that moves with the precision of a Swiss watch. So what does all this control actually buy them? Analysts estimate that by cutting out the hatcheries, the feed brokers, the slaughterhouse margins, and the transportation logistics of the big chicken firms, Costco saves approximately 35 cents per bird. To a casual observer, 35 cents is a rounding error. It's the change you leave in the cup at a coffee shop. But in the world of high-volume retail, 35 cents is an empire. Multiply that 35 cents by 100 million chickens a year. That is $35 million in pure savings annually. This is the math that allows the $4.99 price tag to exist. While competitors like Kroger or Whole Foods are paying $7 or $8 to put a similar bird on the shelf, effectively subsidizing the profits of Tyson and Perdue, Costco is paying cost. They have successfully insulated themselves from the market. If the price of chicken goes up globally, Costco doesn't care. They aren't buying chicken. They are buying corn and labor. As long as they can control those inputs, they can hold the line against inflation indefinitely. It is a triumph of logistics, a masterclass in operational efficiency that would make Jeff Bezos jealous. They had engineered a system that could turn cheap Nebraska corn into a cooked dinner for $5 anywhere in the country. But biology is not a widget. You can vertically integrate steel, you can optimize software, but when you try to optimize a living organism, scaling it up to millions of units in a confined geographic area, you invite a variable that cannot be controlled by a spreadsheet. They had built the perfect machine, but had they inadvertently created the perfect target for something they couldn't see? Efficiency is a double-edged sword. The same centralization that allows Costco to save millions also creates a singular, terrifying vulnerability. In the military, they call it a single point of failure. In epidemiology, they call it a petri dish. By concentrating 40% of their chicken supply into a tight cluster of barns around Fremont, Nebraska, Costco has placed all their eggs, literally and metaphorically, in one basket. The efficiency of the system relies on density. The closer the barns are to the processing plant, the cheaper the transport, but density is the best friend of disease. The specter haunting this entire operation is HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza, bird flu. It is a virus that moves with the wind, carried by wild waterfowl migrating across the continent. When it strikes a commercial flock, the result is not treatment, it is depopulation. Entire barns housing tens of thousands of birds must be culled immediately to stop the spread. In a decentralized system, if one farm gets hit, the supply chain absorbs the blow. But in Costco's Project Lincoln, a significant outbreak could theoretically paralyze the entire complex. If the Fremont facility were forced to shut down for decontamination, the flow of those 100 million birds would stop instantly. The rotisserie counters across America would go dark. The anchor would be lifted. But the threat isn't just viral, it is also social. When Costco first arrived in Nebraska, they were greeted with a mix of economic hope and environmental dread. Not everyone wanted a mega complex in their backyard. The reality of raising 100 million chickens is visceral. It smells, it produces waste, a lot of waste. Local residents and environmental groups launched lawsuits and protests, raising alarms about water contamination. They pointed to the nitrates from chicken litter leaching into the groundwater, threatening the very soil that makes the region so fertile. This is the hidden cost of the $4.99 price tag. It is a cost not paid in dollars at the register, but in the degradation of local aquifers and the quality of life for neighbors. Costco has spent millions on water treatment and air filtration, striving to be a good neighbor. They argue that their facility is cleaner, safer, and more regulated than any standard farm. And in many ways, they are right. The technology is cutting edge, but the friction remains. The company is now a landlord in a community that is watching them with suspicion. Every smell, every truck, every report of a sick bird is scrutinized. There is also the ethical dimension. To maintain that price, the chickens are bred for rapid growth. They reach slaughter weight in weeks, not months. Critics argue that this industrial velocity comes at the expense of animal welfare, creating a bird that can barely support its own weight before it is harvested. Costco is aware of these shadows. They know that the halo effect of the cheap chicken can be tarnished instantly by a scandal, a viral video of mistreatment, a major water leak, or a catastrophic disease outbreak could turn their greatest asset into a public relations nightmare. So the gamble continues. Every day the trucks roll into Fremont and the birds roll out. The system works flawlessly, until it doesn't. Costco has built a fortress against economic inflation, but they are now fighting a war on two new fronts, against the microscopic threats of nature and the macroscopic scrutiny of the public. With the risks so high and the margins so thin, one has to wonder, has this massive investment actually made Costco invincible, or has it just given their competitors a blueprint for how to defeat them?
We return finally to the back of the warehouse, to the heat lamps, to the smell, to the line of people waiting for a bell to ring, signaling a fresh batch. At the beginning of this story, we looked at the rotisserie chicken and saw a bargain. But now, when you look at that plastic container, you should see something else entirely. You should see a fortress. Costco has spent nearly $500 million, fought legal battles, disrupted an agricultural ecosystem, and taken on the risk of biological catastrophe, all to protect this one item. Why? Because they have built what Warren Buffett calls a moat, a defensive perimeter so wide and so deep that competitors cannot cross it without drowning. Consider the position of their rivals. Walmart, Kroger, BJ's Wholesale, they are all titans of retail. They have billions in cash, but none of them have the stomach for what Costco did in Nebraska. To match Costco's price on rotisserie chicken without losing a fortune, they would have to replicate Costco's infrastructure. They would have to buy the land, build the mills, hire the farmers, and spend 5 years navigating the regulatory hell of vertical integration. And until they do that, they are mathematically incapable of winning this fight. If a competitor tries to sell a chicken for $4.99 today, they are subsidizing it with profits from elsewhere, bleeding slowly. If they raise the price to $6.99 to make a profit, they effectively hand their customers over to Costco. Costco has trapped them in a checkmate scenario. By the time the competition realized that the chicken was a strategic weapon, the factory in Fremont was already processing 2 million birds a week. But the ultimate genius of this strategy isn't about chicken at all. It never was. If you are a Costco member, ask yourself, why do you renew your card?
Why do you pay $60 or $120 a year just for the privilege of walking through the door? You do it because you trust that you are getting the best possible price. The $4.99 chicken is the physical proof of that promise. It is the recurring reminder that Costco is on your side, fighting the forces of inflation, corporate greed, and supply chain chaos to keep your dinner affordable. That trust is the most valuable asset in retail. The rotisserie chicken is the loss leader that leads to the lifetime value. Costco doesn't care if they make zero profit on the bird. They don't even care if they lose a few cents, because the moment you pick up that chicken, you are likely picking up a bottle of wine, a bag of avocados, and a new set of patio furniture. And more importantly, you are guaranteeing that you will be back next week. The chicken is the bait, the membership fee is the catch. In a world where prices fluctuate wildly and consumer loyalty is dead, Costco has anchored itself to a single, immutable number. They built a factory to freeze time. So the next time you stand in that line, waiting for a hot bird fresh out of the oven, remember this: you aren't just buying dinner, you are participating in one of the most sophisticated, high-stakes economic gambles in history. And as long as that price tag says $4.99, Costco is winning. But as the world changes and the costs of farming continue to rise, one has to ask, is this level of control the future of all business, or is it the last stand of an old empire?